is time for the 6th movie recommendation that was left for me by you all in my comment section over the last few months. And strangely, this is not the first movie that I reviewed here on my channel that contains genetically modified farm animals, because back in February, I watched Isolation from 2005, which deals with genetically modified cows. But for today, we're heading all the way over to New Zealand, which is infamous for the number of sheep that it has got. As of June last year, New Zealand had 25 million of them, which is insane. So today, we're going to find out what happens when you genetically modify sheep and they turn into woolly murder weapons. But if you don't know anything about Black Sheep from 2006, let me quickly fill you in. Black Sheep from 2006 is a horror comedy. Henry, who has a fear of sheep, decides to go back home after 15 years to sell his share of his family house, only to realise that his brother Angus has been experimenting in genetic engineering, turning the harmless sheep into bloodthirsty killers that terrorise the sprawling New Zealand farmland. If you're new here, I go by Hordes, and the snoring belongs to my little fur baby buglet who is asleep off camera right now. But if you're not new, welcome back. I talk about horror movies here on my channel on Mondays and Fridays. But as always, when it comes to watching movies that I have never seen before, I am now going to go and watch Black Sheep from 2006 off camera. So that way, if you two decide that you want to watch this movie about woolly murder weapons, nothing will be spoiled for you, because nobody wants to watch a movie you've just watched somebody else watch from start to finish, and I keep it spoiler free here on my channel because nobody, and I mean nobody, likes spoilers. When I said that Henry had a fear of sheep, I defy anybody not to have trauma when it comes to sheep when you see what his older brother Angus did to him as a child. Talk about mess you up for life. Plot-wise, Black Sheep follows Henry, who is simply trying to sell his half of the family home to his ego of a brother, Angus. Henry finds out that Angus has been doing scientific modifications to the family's herd of sheep, which are now feral little woolly monsters. Henry then has to try and get off the farm simply with the help of the farmhand, whose name I cannot remember, and a hippy-dippy animal activist who carries aromatherapy candles around with her everywhere, because sometimes you've just got to find a way to realign all of your chakras. When being chased down by a herd of feral sheep might not be the time to do this. And while trying to escape, Angus the ego and his struck-off scientific girly friend are still genetically modifying sheep. Like, that is the plot for Black Sheep.
Now you know.
I did find that I enjoyed the second 40 minutes of this movie more than I enjoyed the first 40 minutes of this movie, and that is simply because the herd of feral murder sheep turn up and start causing actual chaos at that point. And if you promise me a woolly massacre, I'm gonna want a woolly massacre. And at least I can say around the halfway point, you gave me a woolly massacre.
She's dead.
Fellow 90s babies, does anybody else remember the TV show Animorphs? Because if you do, Black Sheep, the transformation from human to sheep, just gives me major Animorphs vibes, but without the really questionable CGI. Like, you will see somebody get bitten on camera, and then slowly off camera, you will see them pop up again and again, more sheep. And I'll be honest, I quite like this. I think it's so goofy. Like, Black Sheep, it doesn't take itself seriously, and at one point there are two human sheep hybrids just chowing down on another human while still wearing their business suits. I do like the practical effects and the puppetry in this movie. There is nothing quite like seeing a sheep rip a man's mouth straight off, or watching two sheep play tug of war with a man's intestines, and that is exactly what happens in Black Sheep in the middle section. And I will say that most of the gory parts in this movie are saved for the second 40 minutes, which is probably why I liked it more, because like I said earlier, if you're gonna promise me a herd of feral murder weapons, I'm gonna want the feral murder weapons to actually do chomping and biting and ripping things off, and that's what happens in the second half of this movie. But Black Sheep is a bit like Resident Evil, but with sheep instead of zombies. Like, you've got scientists that have decided to experiment on sheep instead of rats. The sheep have then gone out and bitten people who have then turned into sheep-human hybrids, and Angus is technically like Albert Wesker, but if Wesker liked doing bedroom sports in his spare time with sheep, like if you've played Resident Evil 5, you'll know Albert Wesker's final form. So think less massive man with tentacles and more massive sheep.
Different, but same.
The humour just didn't end up being for me in the end, and I say this every single time that I watch a horror comedy, that just because a movie's humour isn't for me, and does not mean that I don't think it will work for somebody else, because humour is just as subjective as horror, and every single country has their own unique sort of comedy styles and sense of humour, and some of them you are going to gel with and some of them you are not, and in this case it just didn't gel for me. There was one moment that made me laugh, but that is because, again, she's a 90s baby, when all of a sudden the human hybrid sheep things all sit up like The Undertaker from WWE. Black Sheep just isn't personally for me, and while I'm still pleased that I watched this movie, because you never know if a movie is going to be for you until you watch it or not, it just didn't end up being for me. And I can say that this mostly comes down to the sense of humour in this, and I think if you like this style of humour, you will like Black Sheep a lot more than I did, simply because the humour is such a big part of this movie. So in the end, I am actually going to give Black Sheep from 2006 a 3 out of 5 stars, and there is one big reason behind this, and that is because Henry, our main protagonist, is so damn likeable, and you can't help but root for this guy to overthrow his ego of a brother, Angus, and for him to come out triumphant in the end and not be bitten and turned into a human sheep hybrid himself. I also really like the practical effects in this. I love the puppetry. I think the sheep are done really well. But like I said, the sense of humour just isn't for me. And in a movie that relies on you liking the sense of humour and getting the jokes, it's just, yeah, not for me. So there you have it, my initial thoughts and my review for my first time watching Black Sheep from 2006. If you've also seen this movie, I would love to know what your thoughts and opinions are on it down in the comment section down below. And if this is a movie that you think you might be interested in watching, like I always do, I will leave a link to justwatch.com in my description bar so you can find out where it is streaming in your country. If you would like to know where else you can find me though, I am also over on Instagram and Letterboxd at HordesOfHorror, where I've watched over 160 horror movies so far this year, so there is plenty that I have not talked about here on YouTube. But speaking of YouTube, I will be back on Friday with another solo movie review, and this time it is, without a shadow of a doubt, the movie that I have been recommended the most here on my channel. Nothing comes close to the amount of times that I have been told that I need to watch Zombie Ass Toilet of the Dead. So you asked for it, so it will be coming on Friday. So until next time, bye.